Hey guys, my name is Tim Compton and I'm the Artistic Director here at Goggleworks. Today I'm going to be hanging out in this beautiful printmaking studio where we've got a little bit of everything going on. I'm going to be following along with the kit that we have that's going out. That's the block printing kit. Today I'm going to be taking this image here that I've drawn on my piece of linoleum. This is linoleum that we use to carve these blocks with. It's the same stuff that you might have on your flooring at home, only we have small sections of it that we can carve up using some of these handy tools and actually carve out that image, and then I'm going to show you how we roll ink on it and actually print the finished piece. So should be an exciting process. I've been looking forward to doing this print all week, so I hope you'll join me, and if you have a kit at home, you can also make one of your own. So let's get started. So you can see that I've got my drawing here, and I just looked up a picture on Google that I liked. I knew I wanted to do a paper airplane flying through the clouds. I found a drawing of a paper airplane and I drew it on here with a brown Sharpie marker. A pencil will work just fine. A pen, I just happen to have this marker around and handy, so anything that you've got that will mark on it, even a crayon, will work just fine for this process. So what I did is the drawing that is the brown now will become the printing of my black later, and that's really important to keep in mind because I'm going to cut away a part of this, and the part that I cut away will actually become the white part of the paper. So with some of these parts of the clouds, I might choose to leave a little bit more of that. Maybe I want to go in here and make this part all brown. So that I leave sort of these swooping shapes and stuff like that. And maybe I want to cut away just a little bit around that, maybe like an outline around this piece. So I can play around with that kind of stuff. One of the things that's important to keep in mind is the more planning you can do right now, the better, because once you cut this stuff away, you're not going to be able to kind of stick it back on. So every once in a while I'll be cutting and I slip and I end up cutting through something. I need to find a way to make that work. So a little bit of this is planning, a little bit of this is sort of letting the artwork evolve as it evolves. So I have two cutters here. In the kit there will be one. I have two really just so that you can see the difference between the two, and it'll help things go a little bit faster with the video. One of the things you'll notice is when I rattle it, there are pieces in the handle of this. So you'll get several different pieces in your kit. There's a handful of different cutter shapes in there that can be used for cutting, and really it's just different shapes for different looks. What I've got here are two of probably my favorite cutter heads to use. I don't know if you can see them very closely, but this is a V gouge shaped like a V. I use this one the most for cutting in detail, and then this is a U gouge because it looks like the letter U, and I use that one hogging out a little bit more material. So when I go to cut around this area here, if I tried to use the V gouge, it cuts a very thin line. It would take me all day to cut that out, so I'm going to use the U gouge to cut that out because it'll go much faster. Now, the actual cutting process is fairly straightforward. There's a couple of key rules that are the most important. The first one is to, if you're right-handed or left-handed, use your non-dominant hand to hold the piece in place. And so I'm going to kind of push that down towards the table. And then I'm going to use my other hand, and I kind of hold it with it in the butt of my hand. So kind of the end of the tool resting in my hand and then my fingers around the end. That'll help me kind of angle it and get some real oomph behind it. Occasionally I'll see students holding it out like this. That doesn't give you any power. So it's really important to use it that way. And then probably the most important tip to keep in mind is to make sure that you're always cutting away from your hand. You never want to cut towards your hand. That's how people get cut. So we want you to be safe at home when working. If you're younger or if you are inexperienced with printmaking, I always recommend making sure having a parent or a friend around so that if anything does go wrong, you have sort of a backup. And it's always great to have a second set of eyes on to help keep you from cutting towards yourself. You know, every once in a while I do catch myself feeling like the best best way to get at an angle might be to cut back towards myself. If I have somebody else around that's also doing a printmaking piece, first of all, it's fun to talk to them while cutting, but secondly, they tend to have an eye on me and help me to make sure that I'm cutting properly. So make sure that you're always cutting away from your fingers, never cutting towards your hand. And this stuff does cut pretty easily. So you can do long cuts where you want to keep it kind of shallow, or you can do little shortcuts where you just do little dips in. I'm going to do a combination of the two. Once I get done doing the edging like I've done here, sometimes I'll swap out for that U-gouge and start to move out a lot more material. What I almost did there was what I was talking about before, where it kind of bounced off of my cut and then I went and sunk it back in. And sometimes if it bounces like that, I'll cut back in actually where I didn't mean to, and so I need to kind of then incorporate that into my design. So always the more planning you can do, the better off you'll be, but every once in a while something unexpected happens when you're cutting a block, and that's part of art, is just that creative problem solving of now what sort of thing. And the more you practice that, the better you'll get at it when it does happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work at removing this material. I'm going to try and get it all out, and it's going to take a little bit, but you can see I'm already starting to move out some of that material. This is the part that's going to be white when I do roll my ink over top. All right, you can see I got a cut here. I went through and kind of notched out. I didn't hit exactly on my lines on each one, but I think I have a nice texture that'll print well here. You'll also see I went with my bigger U-gouge and cut out some sort of directional lines. This gave it kind of an exciting look. And I think it'll print pretty fun. One of the things that I'm not sure I'm gonna totally love is my clouds. I sort of went in with the U-gouge and kind of went around them. But what I tried to do was to cut away less material than I think I want, and because I can actually always go back and recut it. One of the ways to check while you're cutting, if you would like to, is you can take a Sharpie marker or anything with a flat marker, and you can kind of lightly brush over it. And whatever that hits is where your ink is also going to hit, and that'll pretty accurately show you what's going to print. So you can see with my cut lines there how that's going to print. So that's sort of a trick that'll help you to kind of see your different parts of your print. You'll see there are a couple areas on my block that are not perfect up here in the corner. I had a chunk kind of break out. I don't think that's going to be hugely problematic when I print. If I kind of put my finger over there, I can kind of see what it's going to look like. And then over here you see that I had it slip. That might show up a little bit. I can run that test again over that to see. I think it might cover it up, so it might not have been too deep. But it's not totally perfect, but I think it's going to print pretty well. So now that I've got my first cut, I'm going to do my first print, and that's called an artist proof. So I'm going to show you the process of printing with ink. Lastly, you'll notice that there is actually a scrape here on the table. I did have a piece that slid. Thankfully, I had my hand over here as I was cutting in that direction, and I did not hit my hand because I was always cutting away from my hand. But it is important, don't do this on the dining room table. It is possible for those to slip and nick. So make sure you're using a scrap board or something that you can mess up a little bit and not have to worry about. And then lastly, you'll see it does make a lot of shavings and stuff like that. So make sure that it's in an area where you can get a little bit messy. All right, I've got a bit of our station set up here with some of the pieces, and this is where the kit really comes to shine. So in the kit, you're going to get your linoleum and the cutter that we showed you in the previous bit, but then there's also going to be several other tools. We have a putty knife that's used for ink. We have the roller that's actually used for rolling the ink on there. There's going to be a piece of glass or plexiglass, some ink, and then even a wooden spoon. So these are all the different parts that are necessary for printing, and we've got a couple of sheets of paper here. I did want to take this opportunity to show you another one that we've been working on, another plate here. This one actually spells out the word art. You'll notice on the plate it's actually backwards, and that's because when you flip it to print, it does print backwards. But you can see sort of the fine detailed lines involved in this one here, and just kind of how drastically different these two are. You can see a very different style between the two different ones there. So a lot of opportunity for individuality when it comes to printmaking. So we're going to print the artist proof for the first version of our paper airplane print here. To do that, I'm going to take my ink, pop that open. You'll notice it's not a full container, and that's because a little bit of ink goes a long way. I'm just going to take even a dab of that and kind of smear it out on my piece of glass. Now it's important to kind of mix up your ink. It'll have some sort of globbier bits in it. Those can actually be broken up pretty easily. And the way that I'm going to mix that ink is I'm going to scrape, and then I'm going to wipe it down. Scrape, wipe it down. And I'm going to keep working it like that to get a nice silky smooth ink. I want to try and be attentive to any clumps that don't break up. I want to try and move those out because those will actually get in the way. Now, you'll notice that I'm kind of scraping it all out there, and then I'll kind of go back and clean it up. Now, I'm not coating this entire plate with ink, and actually what I want to try and do is kind of keep most of the ink up here towards the top, and then only drag a little bit out into the plate here. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pick up that ink with my roller. So I'm going to sort of work that roller in two different directions, try and evenly spread out that ink. And what you're listening for, you're actually listening to the ink. Let's see if I can get it to go. This is actually slimy. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's actually too much ink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, pull back some of that ink, and use the ink that's already on that roller. And there, hope you can hear that. Sounds like sizzling bacon. That's the ideal sound that you're going for with your ink. If it's sliding around, you have way too much ink. And if you have too much ink, what's going to happen is it's going to smudge down into your cuts, and it's going to mess up your cuts. So you really are looking for that sizzling bacon. You can see if you get too much ink like I did there, I just went back with my scraper and scraped that ink all back up towards the top. Going to work over top of this. Now it's time to apply this. I have a slight curve to this piece of linoleum, so I kind of want to start by going along that curve, and instantly you can start to see all those cuts show up. I'm going to roll a little bit more ink, go back, sort of go a different direction with it. Keep adding ink as I need to. And really what I'm looking for right now is I want a nice even coat. Every once in a while what I'll do is I'm rolling up, I'm going to actually touch that wetter ink, that pool of ink that I've got up there, and drag that back down. Do a couple direction shifts. You can see starting to get pretty cool looking print. Now this is going to be my first print, my artist proof is what it's called. It's very rare that the artist proof comes out absolutely perfect, so I'm not going to hold myself to that standard this moment. I'm trying to not get ink all over the place. But now you can really start to see what my print is. And you can see what I was talking about before, where I'm not sure that my clouds are going to necessarily read as clouds. I didn't cut away enough material. So now I'll need to kind of go back and rethink those. But I'm going to run this print anyway. I'm going to make sure that I don't work on the area where I got a little bit of ink. This is a big piece of glass that has white behind it, so that it's very easy for us to tell where our ink is. I'm going to take this here, I'm going to flip this down, and now I need to eyeball it to get it perfectly in the middle. Being as careful as I can, just trying to get it just perfect. Now, if you set it down and it's not perfectly in the middle, this is your artist proof. You're going to do a couple of prints. That's the beauty of printmaking, is that you can always make more. What you don't want to do is try and shift it too much, because that wet ink will mess with it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my hand underneath there, pick up that plate, and flip it down, holding that plate in place. That's a two-handed trick right there. Then comes the wooden spoon. Believe it or not, a wooden spoon is one of the best tools I've ever found for transferring a print. I'm going to use my finger on the back of it and my thumb and forefinger on the other side, and I'm going to apply pressure to it, and I'm going to work my way around my print, holding my other hand on my print, making sure that nothing slides around. You'll see I've got quite a bit of pressure behind it. This finger on the back is what's applying all that pressure so nicely. I'm feeling for where the edges are and working my way around. So I just printed that side there. Now I'm going to gently shift it, being careful to make sure my plate moves with my paper. And I'm going to shift over to the other side here, and I'm going to work over that other side. Finding those edges again. Like I said, believe it or not, a wooden spoon is one of the best things for this. They make all kinds of different tools, but I love me a good wooden spoon. So, at this point, I can start to see a little bit of texture behind it. You can see right here, this edge. That's actually dirt coming off the back of this spoon. It's a well-loved spoon in our printmaking studio. But that is going to be a pretty good print. You can always put your hand on the back side and pull back your print. Here comes the magic moment. Ooh, ah. And see if you've transferred enough of that ink. You can see there's a couple of little spots there that don't have a whole lot of ink on them. At this point, I could put it back down because my hand held my paper stuck to my plate in the exact same place. And I could go back and massage that a little bit more. Make sure that I get up all the ink off that plate that I can. So, I think that's going to be pretty good. Set aside my spoon, and the moment of big reveal, I'm going to pull it back, and I've got my airplane. So a couple different things. You can see that the ink didn't get quite all the way to that edge. It actually played out pretty well in that area that broke off of my print. You'll notice that the plane is now flying in the opposite direction. That's always important to keep in mind when you're printmaking, is that the image is going to flip. You'll also see that my clouds don't really read as clouds, they're black blobs. So I am going to clean this plate up, and I'm going to go back in and carve a little bit more on it. I can use that V-gouge and kind of cut out a little bit more shape and really define those clouds a little bit better. Now, here in our printmaking studio, we do have a wall designated to prints. So I'm going to sign this as if it were a finished print. The way that you sign a print is that you do the title over on the left-hand side, the number of the edition in the middle, and your name over on the edge. So this is going to be Paper Airplane. Over here on the side. AP is artist proof. So this is actually not a run of 50 or 100 prints. This is the very first one, so it's called the artist proof. And then I would sign over here, over on the edge. And that is how you sign a finished print. All right, now I've got my finished print. I can take my plate, let that dry, and then I can go back and carve on it a little bit more. But this is going to need to dry for a couple of hours, otherwise it'll transfer that ink. So I'm going to set that aside. Set aside your prints. They do take a little bit of time to dry. I usually try to put them out in the sun if it's a nice day. I want to show you how to do some of the cleanup. That's the critical part, and any parents out there or people that are fastidious will, why did I say that word? And action. All right, so I've made my print here. I want to take a little moment here to show you kind of the proper way to clean up. That's going to be an important piece of it. So first things first, set your plate aside. It's going to take a little while for that to dry. Set your prints aside. Those are going to take a while to dry. You can kind of set those outside in the sun if it's a nice day. Let those dry and they'll be good to go. Once that print has dried off, or the plate has dried off, I can go back in and carve on it and make another print later. For the ink, if the ink has not sat out very long, you can actually pop back open that container and return the ink to the container and use it for more prints later. In this case, because I'm making some changes, I want to try and save every little bit of ink I can. This ink is kind of sticky. That's a very telltale sign of printmaking ink, is it's a very sticky ink. Stickier than paint. And that's because it actually needs to stick to the plate and stuff like that. See, I got a little bit on my finger. It's not going to be the end of the world, but it will stain clothes, so be mindful of that. Now, my putty knife here and my roller, if I've got some paper towels laying around, those work really well. In our studio, we use good old-fashioned phone books. Those pieces of paper are really great for cleaning up, and you can start by just rolling the roller on there to get some of the ink off. And then you can take your putty knife, wipe that on there. If you're at home, probably the best thing that I found is if you got some heavy duty paper towels, that'll also work. That saves you a little bit of scrubbing on it. Now, when it comes to cleaners, Dawn dish soap works great for cleaning this stuff up. You can kind of just put it all in the sink and take care of it. I will say that your roller, after you wash it, we want to make sure that we don't put it roller side down. If you put it roller side down, that'll leave a flat spot, and then it's kind of like a flat spot on a tire where it's bump, 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 bump as if somebody goes to roll. So you'll notice that when I was printing, I always put it upside down. Same thing after you wash it. When it's drying, you want to make sure you put it upside down. Spoon shouldn't be too dirty. You can set that aside. So really the three things that we have to clean up here are the plate, the roller, and the putty knife. We've got a material called Simple Green. It's basically just a degreaser, and it works really, really well. You can also use a counter cleaner, or like I said, Dawn dish soap works really well too, if you just want to clean it up in the sink. So cleanup is an important part of any art making process. You can't leave the studio a mess. You need to take the time to clean it up. I'm going to take all these items to the sink and make sure that they're all taken care of. So thanks so much for joining us in the studio. I hope you have a great time. Hope you get some great prints, and please do share those with us online. We'd love to see them.